For starting the video. Okay, now we are officially live. Linus, take it
Yes,
away.
sir. All right, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, welcome to yet another Taidu Studios live stream. We are blessed today to have a special guest. But before we launch into that, I just want to bring us up to speed on what a very important day this is. On this day in 1965, The Sound of Music, the film adaptation of the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, premiered and, of course, went on to win the Academy Award. Another really important event on this day, 1962, Wilt Chamberlain, the basketball player, scored a record 100 points in an NBA Basketball Association game. You know, you can tell things have changed a lot. They didn't really believe in defense back then. Another thing is that it is Moroccan Independence Day. This is the day that Morocco declared its independence from Spain.
Okay.
And a lesser known fact, in 1965, my mother went into labor, and I was born the next day.
Oh, so it's not your birthday; it's your Labor Day.
That's correct.
Got it.
And I, like many first babies, I took my time getting here. It was my mom was in labor for like 28 hours.
Is that why you're always late to your lessons?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, my mom has always said that I would, if it's at all possible, I will be late to my own funeral. So.
Well, we do have a very special guest today, and I don't want to keep him waiting any longer. We have Aaro, who is joining us, so also known as Senzui. So thank you so much for being here today. Will you like to give us a little introduction of yourself?
Yes, thank you. So I'm Aaro Haavisto. My Chikugo, so Shakuhachi name would be Senzui, and I have a little bit of a complicated background when it comes to music, where I started with guitar and then I went to play lutes, and I played lutes semi-professionally for a while, and then I did Japanese interpretation because I studied Japanese language at the same time with music, and then ended up going to Japan to work as an event organizer and technically a coordinator for international affairs. But what I mostly did was organize Finland-related events and concerts and stuff, and continued playing lutes for a while. But then I changed playing different kinds of flutes, and I studied under a Japanese flute maker. So I started making wooden European flutes from the Baroque era and the Renaissance era, and then after that I transitioned to shakuhachi as my main instrument after I just randomly find out that my neighbor is a shakuhachi master, and he introduced me to shakuhachi, and immediately fell in love with the instrument. And even though I did loads of different instruments before, shakuhachi almost immediately became a special thing to me. It hasn't really been the same as what I did with previous other instruments, where like I've adopted the love for this instrument in a way deeper way than I've ever had with other music that I've done before.
Yeah, and that story for me is also just so similar. Like, cause I grew up with violin and viola. I loved playing opera. I did chamber music. I did the whole thing, and then shakuhachi just kind of takes you out of your environment, takes you out of the world you once knew, and shows you something so different. And so now you're in a very interesting school. You are in the Ueda school, which is one that most Westerners don't hear about too much. You know, mainly they hear about Kinko and Tozan, and then afterwards they'll hear something like, oh, there's Kinpuryu, there's Wadazumi Do, but Ueda doesn't pop up so much. So can you give us like the hot take of what is Ueda?
Yeah, so Ueda is an offshoot from Tozan that was created by the founder Ueda Hodo about around 100 years ago. He was a student of Nakao Tozan, and it is at one point it was the third biggest school after Dozan and Inko. And it had, I think, several thousand teachers in Japan. Currently, there are, I think, 300 licensed shihan, and so it's still not a small school. But it is very much located in Japan, where I believe I'm about 100% sure that I'm the only non-Japanese teacher of Ueda. And Ueda has a very interesting beginning where it was Ueda Hodo was a very talented student of Nakatoban, and he received his Daishihan or his Chikurinken, and then Daishihan in Tosandu in, I think, 1911. And he then, there's an interesting story where he went to Oyasan, which is an important mountain in Japan with a lot of temples, and he stayed in a temple, and his idea was to stay there for, I think it was a week or a week and a half, and play shakuhachi and just immerse himself in practice. But the moment he took his shakuhachi and started playing, a monk rushed in and said, "Oh, actually, it's not allowed to play here. So we would like you to not play shakuhachi at all for the entire duration if you're stay here."
You know, there's another related story to that, actually. There was a monk named Kakushin, and not the famous Zen monk, a different Kakushin, who also had a very small temple at Koyasan. And the one thing that's written about him quite often is everybody goes, he's such a terrible flute player, and we wish he would stop. So I think some of the reasons why people don't, maybe there could be some rules made after Kakushin. It's like, let's just not do flute anymore at Koyasan.
That is very much a Japanese thing, because if there's a problem with someone, then everybody will be banned from doing the same thing.
Yes, this is the solution.
Yeah, but so then he had booked that stay to immerse himself in practice, but then he couldn't practice for an entire time, and he didn't really have a possibility to go back early either. So he stayed there, and he decided to start composing without actually being able to play the flute. So this is him making his very first composition without ever having learned composition or even thought about it, without having access to his flute from his head. And it took him, I think, the first night, and he composed his first piece.
Wow.
And this piece is called Samitare. And after coming back from Koyasan, he showed this piece to Nakato-san, who said that it looks great, and they want to actually adopt it as repertoire in Tozan school. So this isn't the start of the problem. The problem was that he, without asking permission from Tozan Sensei, went and performed this piece, and called it basically his composition. And so, because it was supposed to become part of the repertoire, this was sort of taking too much credit for it. So he was then.
Yeah, he stole his thunder. And this is also a very very Japanese thing too, where how teachers can control what their students are allowed to do and not allowed to do, as well. And I know that we've experienced a lot of this ourselves as being in Japan for a long time. And your whole entire time being in Japan is really interesting. So I do want to talk about that a little bit later as well. But continue on, please.
Yeah. So he performed this piece, and then this started the whole fight about the taking too much credit for that composition and whatever, and then he ended up starting his own school. And what actually happened is he said to everybody who he was teaching in Tozanryu to stay at Tozanryu and learn under Tozanryu, because he didn't want to also be seen as a person who took out a lot of students from Tozanryu. But a bunch of them still followed him and joined his school, against his advice to stay. And this is the beginning of Ueda around 100 years ago, and the same piece is still, Samidare is still part of the four classic, the main pieces in the school. So there is, Ueda Hodo later composed, I think, hundreds and hundreds of pieces. But there are four pieces that are considered sort of the most important classics in the school and in the repertoire. So in fact, Ueda has a repertoire of consisting of a lot of his compositions, and so compositions by Ueda Hodo are called Ueda-ryu Honkyoku. And then we have a lot of Jiuta and, in fact, some Nagauta as well.
And, I see. And actually, you played some of the music for me, and actually, there's a lot of sections of it that do sound like they have like a tegoto put into the piece.
Exactly. So this is actually something that is common in his compositions, that they start like something of coming from a Koten Honkyoku style or Kinkoryu Honkyoku, kind of like Kinkoryu Honkyoku a lot. And then it changes into something that sounds like Yuta. So it sort of like starts Honkyoku, then transitions into a rhythmical thing.
Yeah, and so for those who are maybe not familiar with these terms, so the Honkyoku stuff, we're familiar with that sort of Honkyoku sound that he's mentioning, the Kinkoryu style. Then when we say like a Tegoto or Jiuta music, we're talking about old Sankyoku music, which would be Koto and shamisen music, specifically shamisen. Later in the Edo period, they added in this thing called Tegoto no mono, which means the thing of the hands. And it was in or it was an instrumental section of the music that was typically played faster. And so that element of the fast Jiuta music finds itself in a lot of the Ueda-ryu pieces. Would you say all of them or just a lot of them?
Not all of them. Like, it is something that's common in some of his compositions.
I see.
But in fact, like, I find it interesting, like, the pieces that became sort of the classics are, they have that very strongly in them. But then he has a lot of compositions that are very modern and very sort of lighthearted, taking influence from probably the Western music of the times or some popular music of the times as well. So there are compositions that don't, to a person who's used to shakuhachi music, don't sound like shakuhachi music a lot, but the ones that really became the classics are those ones that really do incorporate like this shakuhachi honkyoku-like style and then like Judo-like style. But he also has a lot of interesting variations and transcriptions of honkyoku into a sort of different style, where, for example, he has there is a now I'm which one I was thinking about.
That happens to me all the time. So I totally understand what you get that thing.
Yeah.
But maybe we can change the question to something more simple, which is what would be like the identifying element that you would say this is what Ueda-ryu would sound like. So for a person who doesn't know, they know some stuff about shakuhachi music, and they might be part of the other schools. What could you tell them that Ueda-ryu sounds like this?
Yeah, so there are in Ueda-ryu there are also a little bit specific different kinds of playing styles, because even within the school we have Ueda-ryu is kind of widely dispersed in Japan, and so there is Osaka is sort of the main. Kansai is really the center of Ueda-ryu, because that's where the Hodo was, and that's where sort of most of the players still are. But in fact, there are like teachers and players all over Japan, and so there's a little bit of difference in how players play, maybe in the Hiroshima area, which is the second biggest, and then we have like distinctly we can see like which people learned from, for instance, like the second Yemoto, Ueda Kado, and then my teacher's teacher was Tani Senzan, who was Ueda Kado's student, and then Yozan, the current Tani Senzan, is my teacher. And so the way I play Ueda-ryu, it is distinctly coming from that branch, which is sort of the main Ueda-ryu, but we have different sort of there are a couple of characteristics that stay within for pretty much everybody who plays Ueda-ryu, and it's also this lineage from Ueda Kado to my teacher also has become sort of adopted to everywhere quite a bit right now. So, and the interesting thing is that Ueda-ryu is very free in terms of having taken a lot of influences from other schools as well. So there are a lot of things that were adopted from Kinko-ryu after we split from Tozan-ryu. For instance, we do this like tsure, that is kind of Kinko-esque style, or we do like merikomi, which sounds a lot like how players do it in Kinko-ryu, much more than in Tozan-ryu and so forth. But there are a couple techniques that you could recognize Ueda from. When you do koro koro, for instance, Ueda koro koro is almost koro 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 koro, and then we stay at ko for the koro 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 ring. So there's usually a stop between koro koro and then goes on for just 2 hits and then it goes to the end. So that is pretty much every time you do koro koro in Ueda style, you would play like that. And there something like that. I mean, maybe we would go too much in technical detail but talk about all of them, but this is one of the ones that is kind of easy to recognize.
Okay, very cool. Linus, do you have some questions for us?
Actually, he's been hitting on exactly what I wanted to know. It's like I noticed looking at their list of repertoire that like Shikinotone or Sokakurebo pieces that we play. I was just curious how we would know it was the Ueda-ryu version of, for example, Shikinotone. And you've actually done a lot of explaining in this already.
I think that actually not to. I just asked you a question, and then you gave me an idea, so I'm going to take over really quickly because you guys do Tsuru no Sugumori, but you have a kakei in there, which is very interesting. Yeah. And maybe you can talk a little bit about what a kakei is first off, and then what makes that particular piece so unique in the Ueda-ryu school.
Yeah. So I'll just mention quickly that Shikanotone is not. It's quite a bit completely different song from how he would play in Kinko-ryu. But let's go to what you said about Tsuru no Sugomori. So
yeah,
Tsuru no Sugomori is actually like the Ueda-ryu style of Tsuru no Sugomori is it's completely a 2-person piece. So there's a kakei in the middle, but there's a beginning where the main player plays. So there's basically the main player, and then there's the ensemble, the accompaniment by another player. And so one of the main player of the piece will start, and then the accompaniment will start after sort of the first section. And then the accompaniment just plays like ha-haro, 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 ha-haro for like 5 minutes. And that is played in a way where the accompaniment gets to choose the tempo, and then usually they will accelerate. And if you accelerate a lot, you'll make it quite hard for the other player because it is kind of fast sometimes, and then you have to just like follow the other guy. And then there's the kakei, which you'll recognize more similar to Tsuru no Sugomori phrases, but they are played as a kakei, mostly repeating the same, but there are variations. And then after that, we have the same thing going on again, where we play ha-haro, 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 and then another player played. And in the end, again, play together a couple of phrases. But it is, I think in Tozan-ryu there is a 2-person version of Tsuru no Sugomori, which is I think there's some similarities to that, but I haven't really listened to it a lot. I think It's not exactly what I described, but it has like
Yeah, I
the
think,
same melody.
and there also is there's two Tozan schools, right? So there you have Tozan and Shin Tozan, and so maybe one of them does it and the other one doesn't. I'm not an expert on Tozan school either, but maybe we'll have to have a guest on sometime to go over Tozan stuff as well. If there was going to be one piece that you would have to say, like, this is the piece that you should listen to that really gives like the overarching, this is Ueda to you, what piece would you say would be that one?
The mostly agreed, most important for me in the repertoire would be Ochiba. So Falling Leaves. And I think you can find my teacher's version on Spotify. And I have a version on YouTube.
Yep, I found that. I'm gonna share that on here. So
yeah. I just want to say about that is that I recorded that before going into the details with my teacher, like much more. So if I played right now, if I listen to my own video right now, I'll keep like hearing that. No, it's not played like that. Like, so I'm just here promising that within the coming few months, I'm gonna record another version, which is going to be quite a bit different.
And that's okay, because everybody should also subscribe to your channel too. So I will also put the link for your YouTube channel here as well. Speaking of subscriptions and speaking of likes and all that kind of stuff, if you haven't liked this video yet, you should like this video, share it to your friends, and don't forget to sign up for the membership if you want to learn more about shakuhachi, take lessons, and get access to a bunch of lesson material as well. So
that was just smooth as butter, Sensei. That was a beautiful transition there.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, sometimes they're really good and they segue just perfectly, like a mall cop, right? But
right.
Do you have? So let's try this again, Linus. Do you want to ask a question?
Are you gonna let me ask a question?
Yeah, I will let you ask a question. I promise.
All right, so I actually was curious about the flutes that you play, and coming out of Tozan, I know kind of what a Tozan flute looks like and what they sound like compared to the flutes we play, but just curious if there were any sort of structural differences or differences in tuning and style, angle of utaguchi, whatever, in the flutes that are preferred for Ueda.
Well, I would say that the current players of Ueda are mostly playing Tozan style flutes, and Ueda has become smaller during the time when the shakuhachi construction technique has changed and modernized a lot. So mostly the makers are making Tozan flutes for Tozanju, and then those same flutes for Ueda, so I think they are identical.
Okay.
And are those like, when you're saying like those people, are you talking about like early 1900s style Tozan or like modern Tozan?
Yeah, so this is actually interesting. So Osaka area has a lot of venerable makers, right? So we have Ichijo, we have Gyokusui, we have Shinzan, a lot of big makers in Osaka and living in northern Osaka.
Chikuzen Tamai and so on, and even Yozan was a kansai maker because that's where he was brought up in making.
Chikusen Kobo was basically the base where a lot of modern shakuhachi making was invented, and so Chikusen and all these other makers who were under Chikusen and then started their own workshops. They, and also some of the previous makers of Kansai area, like Yufu or Yoshu, they started as Ueda makers. And this can be verified by the fact that the Kobo, the area in Suita, is right next to where the Iemoto's house was and still is. And they came there in order to make flutes for Ueda players. And that's how big we were back in the day, but then they became sort of more Tozan, became mostly who they are selling their flutes to. And so I would say that in some sense, modern shakuhachis are are shaped by the preferences of Ueda players back in the day. And I'm sorry, I can't really account the exact years that when we were bigger, or when Ueda flutes were mostly made in these workshops, but this is how they got started. And my personal flute that I play the most and probably will for the rest of my life was made in Ryufu's workshop in Kobe, and this flute was then later stamped by the founder of Ueda by Hodo-sen, as chosen by the founder as a good flute. So that's why I'm devoted to this flute. But that one specifically is made during the time when the chi was low and the ha was. So the chi is high and the ha is low, and so like when I started this flute, previously to that I was playing a lot of what everybody else plays, with this like really modern style where the tuning is pretty much standardized to fit the pitch without having to work the chi and the ha. When I started playing that flute, I had to adjust myself to the style. But I think in some ways this suits those compositions because they were composed during the time when the flutes were like this. And the Itakuchi is also quite shallow and not as low as modern flutes.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And that's, it's interesting because even the older Kinko flutes of that same time, all the chis are high and the has are low. Same with the Tozan flutes, same with pretty much everything, because people were still tuning in towari. That isn't the towari. The non-towari tunings don't happen until much later, like you're saying. With mainly a huge proponent of all of this is Chiku Zentamai. Changing how much he revolutionized all of the making and all of his students, and he had a lot of students. So, but it's really interesting. I know the flute that you're talking about because you brought it to my house here in Japan, and it's not an easy flute to play for sure. It's definitely is going to take some time to get used to, and I think that there's something to be said about how the older style was, where you had to really learn the flute, not just learn the music itself, but you dedicated yourself to one instrument for a very long time. And it even reminds me of Yamamoto Hozan's his Juon flute, or the Nyosui or whatever flute he was playing. Like there are people who you can go to I think at the museum still, and you can go and try and play it. And a lot of my friends have gone and tried. And they're like, I can't even get a single sound out of it. But there he is playing Take 5 and all the other jazz pieces on it. So there's something to be said about learning the flute, not just the music that goes along with that particular school.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with everything wholeheartedly, and I do think even modern flutes, I think technically it is impossible to create a flute that would exactly, because these are not machined and we have a different bamboo each time and so forth. So even modern flutes have differences where you adjust yourself. But I think obviously what you say, like they used to be more like that. And I think even now we have a lot of like great players who prefer flutes with character and difference to the ones that are made like according to getting as close as possible to a standard.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. Like it's a good topic to talk about too, because even on like the variety of Yozans that I own, not all the hole sizes are the same. So like sometimes he drills holes larger, and sometimes he drills holes softer or smaller, and the sound change that happens from that is really dramatic. And then even hole placements is not always uniform the same because of however the internal bore is. And then of course the bore is not always the same. It's not just a fixed machine. So is not always uniform the same. I think that's Linus in the background there really quickly, just checking our video, making sure that all the audio is going well there. But nonetheless, those sort of difference to me are really important. And it actually changes because I have a couple 1.8s, and so sometimes I use one because I like the sound of it for that particular piece, but then I use the other one because I like that sound for this piece.
Yeah, I have actually some flutes that were made by Okuden, and I really like those for some like very bright colored fast pieces, and then for a more darker sound of Honkyoku, I would switch to a lampo flute and things like that. I did that a lot, and I'm still not completely devoted to that one flute, so I do skip out to do other ones to do things and try things and
Yeah.
match the tone.
I use my my jinashi a lot for sangkyoku, but I do wish I had like a golden era like 1930s flute for sangkyoku. That's the one thing I really feel like I'm missing in my collection. Not that I play sangkyoku that often. But we do have our first question, which is kind of a meme question, so I think it's more for Linus than anything else. So Eric says, in order to be an accomplished shakuhachi player, do we all have to build a significant beard?
I so
I'm not on camera often, but for those who aren't informed, my other activity that I am famous for is that I am a professional Santa Claus, and I've been doing Santa Claus for about 10 years now, and so I have a pretty substantial and now very white beard. When I first started doing it, my beard was brown, but it was quite large. And so now I have the real Santa Claus look going on all the time. So I will say this much: if you have a beard, it definitely changes the way you place the flute on your chin. At least for me, it makes a big difference. And Sean may remember when I was a little earlier on in my study, every New Year's I would shave and like start the beard over every New Year's, and that would mean that I would play horribly for the month of January because without the hair on my chin, the angle and everything was different. So if you're going to grow a beard, stay with it. Don't give up. And once you get used to it, you're stuck. You can't get rid of it. You can't play.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a beard, but the fact is, this is actually just grown, and I've never had a beard before. So actually, I'm used to playing without a beard, and I think I will save this before going to Japan next, because it's just like in Japan everybody knows me the way I looked before. So I like, in Japan there are some like there is a little bit of like people who like beards and people who don't like beards.
Oh, absolutely.
So my previous employer, I think my previous boss actually had a little bit of a beard, but every time we would have a important business meeting, he would like quickly shave it before. And there's this sort of like still this like idea in Japan about like not having a beard or something. But in any case, like it's sort of growing on me, and no pun intended.
I'll tell you, there are stages, right? There, especially in Asia, people are like, oh, it's not, it's 5 days growth or whatever. It's not really a beard. This person's just, maybe they've got vacation, maybe they're taking a break, whatever. And then you get beyond that to where it's obvious that you've intentionally grown a beard, and there's a decision that's been made to grow a beard. And then you get into like where I'm at, where it's Civil War general, Gandalf cosplayer territory, and and then you become known, like my little town here in Kansai. I am known as that guy, that guy with the beard.
Yeah. What's actually kind of interesting is about, I think like maybe 3 weeks ago, I had been growing out a beard for about 2 months, and then I shaved it off, and actually it was very difficult to play afterwards. So I finally felt like you for a second there, Linus. Got a few more comments here and some questions here. So Hitsuchi-chan says, what about Ueda Ryu made you so attached to it?
Oh, okay. So the way I started shakuhachi, so I was living in the countryside in Japan. I was living in the least populated place in Japan, and I was doing those. I was making those European flutes, and then I met in an event that I was one of the organizers. I happened to talk to this local woman who said that her husband plays shakuhachi, because I was talking about flutes, and then she said, like, you could come over and like see, and he'll play for you. And so what happened is, she told me their address, and we found out that they live pretty much next door from us. And so there was a river, and I was living on this side of the river, and when I went out from my door, I'd see their house on the other side. And so, okay, he's like, you live so close by, and I went there literally the next day, and then I heard him play, and he was a Ueda teacher. And I heard him play Samidare, which, as I told you before, was the song that started the whole school. And this was in May. And if you translate Samidare, it means the rain in May. And I listened to this song, and I fell in love both with the instrument and with this song. So personally, Ochiba is the first importance to me, but then this one, because it's what got me started in shakuhachi, it's like has a special place in my heart. So it's called Samidare. I also have that in YouTube. I think I play that better than Ochiba, actually, so I'd recommend you watch that instead to hear the gooder stuff. But Samidare started at the school, and it started my journey with shakuhachi. And then he was a Ueda teacher, and he became my first teacher. We'd like go to the riverside between our houses and play by the river for long periods of time. And my start with shakuhachi was weird, because we didn't start from the beginner material, but we started playing that exact piece from the beginning, and that's like one of the most advanced pieces in the repertoire. So we played like the first 10 times we played like the first two notes, and then we kept going a little bit more. And every time I got new notes, I would write like a date under, saying like, oh, we got this on April 5th or whatever. And then I had that sheet music with me with like all the dates on it and whatever. And then when I left Japan, so he was around 82 at the time, and he wouldn't be able to teach remotely. So I started studying with my current teacher, who was the head teacher of the school. So he's the Iemoto Daihyo Daishihan, so the representative teacher of the Iemoto, because the Iemoto actually doesn't teach himself. And so he's the main teacher of the school. And I found his information online because I needed to continue with the same school, because I had this N. So in Japan, you say N is a sort of connection.
ご縁っていうことですね。
Yeah, go in. I mean, N is the word, and yeah, you're correct. Like it's always said with the go instead.
Yeah. So quickly there, it's the whole entire thing with the N. So N is like the circle, and also means it also has like a double meaning of go N as in 5 cents. And the whole thing is like it's related to you actually should be telling this, because it's related to the shrines. Giving the 5 yen into the shrine is a force of good fortune and good favor as well. So yeah, I think for you, for especially the stories that you've told me, and the many hours and hours and hours we talked online, as well as at the coffee shop, and also at my home with one of your students. You have such great stories, and it's really the love that you have and the passion that you have for shakuhachi is so clear. And of course, we get into such like deep into the woods about such fun things. So I really find that I find your story to be very inspiring, and I hope it inspires other people to continue working and up to whatever level they would like to get out of shakuhachi. I want to do a quick thing and switch the topic, but before we switch the topic, if you haven't liked this video yet, like the video. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Aaro's channel, and if you're interested in learning more about shakuhachi and getting access to a bunch of membership lessons, join the channel and check out all that content. So it's
this kind of deep dive conversation. You could also join us on Discord, where a lot of us get together and chat about these school ideas and the different flute style ideas in great depth. So come over to our Discord as well.
Yeah, we have 78 active members at this very moment. And we also have 500, I think it's almost 560 people who are on the Discord, but there's 78 people that are online right now, and people are talking in the Discord and stuff. So it's a great place to be. Thank you for that. Thank you for mentioning that. But it's not just that you also do shakuhachi stuff. You have a very interesting history with Shinto and doing studies with that. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got into Shintoism and you did like a paper on it and stuff like that?
Well, so I studied Japanology at the University of Helsinki, so that's where I got my bachelor's on Japanese studies, and then I worked as a Japanese interpreter for a while. But then so in Finland, the system is that you usually go on to do your master's as well. So in many countries, it's like bachelor's and then some people do masters. But in Finland, like quite often, if you do bachelor's, you just continue and do your master's as well. So I had automatically my master's studies on Asian studies continuing, and I had to come up with what to study. And I was Buddhism interests me, Japanese literature interests me, Japanese history, Japanese art, everything interests me about Japan. But for some reason, what I ended up with was doing my master's thesis on Shintoism. And what sort of pulled me to that was the idea of how like Shinto in Japan is officially not a religion. It's a tradition, and the upkeep of these old traditions like that come with it and all that. And there's an interesting history why it officially became that way regarding what things that happened after the war and whatever. But I was interested about the fact that, you know, if you ask a Shinto priest about like Shinto as a religion, they will never answer you, and they will never have an answer to that. And if you have to ask a Japanese person about them, they'd be sort of confused. Like nobody believes it. It's not like a personal belief thing. It's more like a tradition thing, and we do this as like we go on like to go to the shrine and we sort of clap in a certain way, whatever. But it's not a question of belief, and it's just a question of doing the thing in the way that was supposed to do when you go to the shrine. And you know, on a specific day when your child is born, you bring them to the shrine, or at New Year's you go to the shrine. And then there are events at the shrine that you go and see, and the Shinto priest that does a sort of ceremony and things like that. And so I was interested about this complete concentration on this ceremonialism and like doing a specific thing on a specific day where you burn the kind of ornaments from the past year. And so these kind of things, lots of things interested me about it, and also the architecture, because the shrines are just very beautiful, and so on. So I decided to my study regarding this, and specifically on Doha Shinto. So there is in Japan there is the imperial Shinto system, which is the main Shinto, but there are 12 sectarian Shinto that are outside of that system. And the biggest one is the Izumo Taishakyo in Himone. So that's where I went, and I studied Izumo Taishakyo, and I went to maybe around 300 different shrines and studied the documentation and studied documents at the different municipalities about where the shrines were located before they're located now, because the Shikinen, during the Sengu, there's a thing called Sengu, where the shrines are rebuilt after a certain amount of years, and these used to be all funded by the government, but then there was I'm not going to go to the details, but it was basically the funding system was changed, or it was cut from that specific funding, and Shinto became more reliant on getting
donations, and that's where like the omamori come into play, and like selling different items. But what I found the most interesting part of the story that you had told me is that how many of the shrines they moved from the mountaintops, because they're like, well, no one's coming to us, But
Yeah.
all the Shinto, like
Exactly.
even like the one, for example, there is one at the top of Nijo-san, but there's also a shrine at the bottom of Nijo-san because no one's gonna go up there and to make a donation.
Yeah. And so the shrines would move to the cities, or like shrines that have more means might have their main shrine up, but then they would start like, because shrines have branches, so both shrines and temples in Japan have side shrines and side temples in different places. So you can, if you go in Japan, you see these like places that are way far from where specific shrine was supposed to be. You'll see a shrine that's named after that. It's actually like a separated like side shrine of that shrine that's located completely elsewhere. But anyway, there's an interesting story that some of the shrines would have in common, which is they had to move the shrine to a different area, and they were ordered by sort of not all the way from the top of the shrine administration, but there were some decision making going on where they were supposed to move the shrine, and they would carry the belongings of the shrine and actually the representation of the kami, which housed in the shrine, and then in a Namikoshi and all that. They would carry all this to the new place and then build a shrine there. But there were specific stories about them like walking and then like deciding that we're too tired, so let's just build it here without permission. and then sometimes they just abandon their shrine and like not be kannushi anymore. And then there are cases where shrines didn't have money to build a new one, so they would move the kami to a common shrine, and a bunch of shrines would become one shrine. And the interesting thing about that is that you have Hachiman-gu, right?
Yeah, Hachiman-gu.
So an interesting thing about shrines that you might know is like there's something jinja.
Yeah, nani nani jinja. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's something jingu or something gu.
Yeah.
Hachiman-gu. So the jingu ones are like belonging to a specific branch of the kami that are related to the emperor of the pastimes and whatever. So, for instance, Hachiman is believed to be like so in that region we would have Hachiman-gu, but then there are Hachiman Jinja now, because they would have Amaterasu being moved to the same shrine, and Amaterasu is a higher being than Hachiman, so they would have to, like, even though it's a Hachiman shrine, they would change it into a Jinja because of the fact that Amaterasu is there.
Yeah, and Hachiman is really interesting, and I think we're going to have Laurent come on to the live stream another week, because Hachiman is supposed to be one of the god of war, but he's also Emperor Ojin, but he's also like somebody else. And so it's a kind of an interesting of like, well, who is he actually, and what's going on with that? And there's a lot of stuff related to Gagaku. I really like... Laurent is here. Perfect timing. Eric Demalanta says shrine squatters. So I think that's pretty much about right. But so Laurent, you're gonna have to join us for a live stream to talk about Gagaku and all of the shrines, and who are these gods, and why do they keep changing their names to who they be? So
I used to do interpretation. I did there was Yabusame, the horseback archery of Japan.
Oh, yes.
They did a performance in Finland in like 2013 or 12 or something, and I was an interpreter there. And so I interpreted to the Ogasawara Kiyomoto, who's I think the 42nd Iemoto. Or back then he wasn't the Iemoto, because the Iemoto was his father, was Toshu. But anyways, so 42nd generation and so it goes all the way to Miyamoto Musashi, the area, and it starts like Kamakura Jidai desho. Anyway, so like something like 1,200 years ago or something. So this tradition has been going on, and part of that tradition is that if the head of the school does not hit all the targets, he would have to do seppuku and kill himself.
Oof.
And if he didn't kill himself for that, then the Hachiman would not revive the universe.
Well,
So the universe would stop existing if he missed and didn't atone for it.
yikes. Yeah, did they perform Saibara in the 2013 event?
I think so. I mean, it was they did the whole was Yabusame, when you do it the original way, like Ogasawara does, it's a Shinto rite. So they have a whole jinji around it. So they have all of these sort of Shinto rites that are done. They have a sort of parade, and then they have like the Shinto rites, and then they have Gagaku, and they have the main event of the Yabusame. So they did all that.
Oh, that's great. Awesome.
There were like 600 Japanese people who all were brought to Finland by the government of Japan funding to do this. So it was a big thing. We had, I think, 10 or 12,000 people in the audience.
Wow.
So quite big.
So I just gave out 5 memberships. So we're looking for a few more questions, and I'll give out 5 more memberships after we'll have that unrated to Fall of Minds question, which is I take it if your baby was born. Well, my baby was not born yet. We still are waiting for that. It's not going to happen until August. But I do have 2 other children, and one of those children are crying in the background. So some of you might be able to hear that. So apologize for all of the background noise.
I was afraid you guys could hear the clatter of my children tramping out the door for school. It's raining quite hard here in my little town, and my kids were just outside the I'm in a tatami room, and they're just on the other side of the door, like yelling, "Where's my raincoat?" I was pretty sure everybody could hear that too.
Well, yeah, you know, we're just, but we work in the real world. You know, we don't have the luxuries of all the soundproof rooms and the screens that tell us what we need to say next.
Yeah, well, if we did, I mean, someday, right? That's the goal.
Yeah, that's right. We're gonna be like a full news station. There'll be Shakuhachi News every week, and we'll give you the updates of all the drama.
The Joe Rogan of Shakuhachi.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan of Shakuhachi. We'll be talking about dropping shrooms and playing Hon Shirabe.
Yeah, we can talk about our supplement regimen.
You know? We have someone from Ogasawa to like shoot arrows at an indestructible shakuhachi.
There you go. Yeah, we have to get Tesla shakuhachis that are indestructible. We'll call them cyber hachis. Anyways, Svenja has a question here, and we didn't talk about this. How is the notation of Ueda Ryu?
It's pretty identical to Tozan, although we don't have measures.
Oh, so you have no division marks, right? It just goes straight.
Yeah. So we don't have the measured lines like Tozan quite usually. I mean, I think not all Tozan notation has that, but it's mostly they have it. But
yeah, they get the boxes and stuff. It's really very clean.
We have it for like some like Niju, so like two player pieces or 3 or 4 player pieces. Although actually composed pieces for 5 shakuhachi as well, for example. So in those we would have a score with measures to see where everybody's going. But usually we don't have measures, but the markings are mostly the same as in Tozan. There are, I think, couple subtle differences and so on and so forth, but it is completely readable to a Tozan player, like almost all of it.
Well, most of my students complain that our measure marks don't mean anything anyway, so it's fine.
They don't mean anything in classical music either. Because we have in classical music we have such like time signatures that don't make sense. We have like I think it was like 8 12 notes or something, like 8, like it should not be 8 12 notes. It should be like measures that are divided in a specific different way. And like in Europe we used to have mensural notation where we would divide things into either 2s or 3s at every level. So we would have tempus perfectum or tempus imperfectum, where the perfect tempo would be divided to 3, and the imperfect tempo would be divided to 2, but then the next level could also be divided to 2 or 3. And that was what Europe used in back in the late Middle Ages or so on and so forth. And then we invented this new sheet music that doesn't really fit some of the time signatures as well as the previous one.
Note inégales. Great times. Okay, so we are getting pretty much towards the end of this. Where can people find more things about you?
So I am just about to release my website, which would be senzui.fi. It's not out yet.
Okay.
It will have like info about Ueda. Actually, I'm also going to make Ueda international website. So there's going to be an English website for Ueda, and the Imoto gave me permission to make one for the international audience. And so that's going to be separately. It's going to be uedaru.com, I think. But that's coming out later. Senzui.fi, I think in a few weeks I'll have that. And I have a bunch of like shakuhachi related stuff for sale in Europe there as well. Actually, it can be ordered to any country, but I think it will mostly benefit European people who are searching for shakuhachi stuff. So I have like beginner shakuhachi, I have sheet music, I have shakuhachi accessories or something. So those are also going to be on that site. But it's going to be out later.
Yeah, you guys have a terrible VAT rate in Europe that really makes it hard to ship anything in there, and it's very, very unfortunate because we can get good prices, and then as soon as you get a good price, it's like, oh, I have to add 20-25% on this item plus all the shipping plus whatever else there may be on top of it. So it's a very unfortunate situation. So it's really good that you're having a shop coming up that's going to offer those things for people as well. Okay, so just to everybody in the chat, is there any other questions that you have about Ueda or any questions that you have for Aaro while he's here? If not, we will basically close up the live stream today. So, Linus, any final thoughts or questions?
No, I really appreciate this opportunity to kind of be exposed to. It's one thing to read about a school; it's another thing to talk to someone who's a living sort of proponent of it. So it's really been enlightening, and I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. It means a lot. I'm really I like the fact that we did talk a lot about the school because to me the school is very precious in a way because it has been like my teacher and the whole culture of the school is like really important for me, and there's a lot of freedom of expression, but there's also a lot of like respect for tradition. So there's these two sides where like you get to learn the tradition and then you get to be free as well. And so I really will continue my journey with Ueda, although I am allowed by the school to play other styles. So I'm playing a lot of stuff from old schools. I'm playing Jinashi as well and Incoentos and material and whatever, but I'm going to stick with like 90% to Ueda. And so anyway, I just want to
when is your cover of Barbie Girl coming out? I'm just curious.
Where's what?
Or Backstreet Boys, whichever you prefer. Sean will hook you up with the sheet music.
Yeah, well, let's do it. Let's do anything.
You gotta have a Barbie duo or Barbie trio, and we'll put it in the Ueda style, and we'll break out into a Teikoto or something.
Yeah, next we'll do like Rickroll.
There you go.
Well, I mean, it's what the people want, right? I mean, that video is very popular. You have to admit,
yeah.
It's very popular.
So before, I don't know when we're closing, but before we're closing, I just want to thank Sean a lot for having me over, and also thank Sean for a lot of friendship and a lot of help with introducing me to his stuff and his life, and like a lot of interesting things that you're doing, because I was never really that much into studying the history of shakuhachi, but like Sean has really pulled me into to learn about that stuff as well, and I'm doing some like translations for stuff that Sean is that we're working on translations together and things like that, and so I want to thank you about that as well. The way we actually connected with Sean was that randomly sending a couple of messages like got us talking, and we talked I think 12 hours straight, and like just about everything and like bonded over like so many things that we're commonly interested in. So thanks a lot for having me here, but much more for your friendship.
Oh, well, the feeling is mutual, very much so. It's always been a pleasure. So, talking with you 12 hours, it felt like sitting down for a cup of coffee for 30 minutes. So, well, let's read off a couple more of these comments. So, Eric says that I need to tell you to put out more videos because you're a great player. I agree, and I think you should. And see, he also says that you need to keep the beard for the videos as well. So, it looks like you are getting fashion advice, and maybe we'll even see you on the front of GQ magazine. Other Eric says, thanks to all, super informative, and of course, a lot of thanks all around. And we have recommendations for George Michael and Michael Jackson on the Shakuhachi. All things will be considered, but not promised to be delivered. Would you like to end us and walk us out of here, Linus?
Yes, thank you very much for being here. Like we mentioned earlier, please like, subscribe, share the video, join us on Discord, take lessons, join the YouTube membership, and don't forget row 4.